So the mission of CHWC is to unite employers and industry partners to support an inclusive healthcare workforce, provide accessibility for unemployed and underemployed populations, and develop innovative responses to the evolving needs of the healthcare industry. We are a sector partnership model that puts employers at the center table. There are 12 of the major Chicagoland healthcare systems at our table, and then more than a dozen strategic partners who lend support. This is one of 3 industry convenings that occurred last week and this week. The goal of these convenings are to allow our employer partners to share their own program models, their own strategies with each other, to learn from each other's challenges and successes, and just get a better feel on what the others are doing in the system. And through that, I hope we also can identify some opportunities to collaborate through CHWC. So we'll have a portion of today's convening be presentation, but then we'll also spend a lot of time in discussion. And I hope then we can generate some ideas for some fundable projects that CHWC can pursue, or perhaps some ongoing conversations. Perhaps we want to convene this group to have more critical conversations moving forward. Last week was our first industry convening, the Youth Pathways and Career Awareness. And during that conversation, we landed on a couple of ideas for CHWC to move forward on. One is to create a sort of directory of all of the youth pathways programs that exist at the CHWC employer partners, and to have that be youth facing so that cross-reference between systems is easier, have that be in front of students, through CPS or through city colleges. So we'll be working on that. We also have an idea to host a one-day event in winter that brings together all of the youth that participate in the youth programs across CHWC for networking opportunities and additional professional development trainings, some job readiness trainings, and some awareness about the upcoming programs for the next summer. And then finally, we'll have our next industry convening on Thursday of this week. It's inclusive talent acquisition. I encourage you to come back or to share that date with your fellow colleagues who are in talent acquisition. We'll have another 3 presentations about different programs and have another discussion. And then I want you all to know that our next quarterly meeting will be on September 14th, 8:30 to 10. And at that quarterly meeting, I will share the learnings that came out of these industry convenings, as well as the ideas, and we will figure out how to move forward on some of these ideas for fundable projects. So today we're going to hear from 3 CHWC partners. First, University of Chicago Medicine, then Advocate Aurora Health, and then Cook County Health and Hospital System. That'll take about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll have another 30, 40, 45 minutes for open discussion. I don't expect a very large group today, so it should be an opportunity to participate in a robust, small discussion where we, first I'd like to pinpoint our shared challenges. We'll hear that in the presentations, but I'd like to refresh us on that. And then talk about how we can collaborate and work together to address those challenges and fill our in-demand roles and advance more of our employees on career pathways. So I'm going to pass it over to Ashley Cassiello from the University of Chicago Medicine right now. Ashley, you should have permission to share your screen.
Thanks, April. Okay. And can everyone see the presentation? Perfect. Okay. So the body of work for workforce development at UCM is relatively new in terms of a formalized department and formalized set of initiatives. So the projects that we have going on right now are very much pilot-based. We have 3 currently ongoing. One is our NCA Pathway Program, which targets nursing support assistants or certified nursing assistants. That's what we call them at UCM. We also have an inclusive pathway program, which targets individuals, adults with disabilities. And we are part of the a group with Healthcare Workforce Together, kind of known as P3, that is a part of the Chicagoland Healthcare Workforce Collaborative, working with Advocate Aurora Health and Sinai Hospital on 3 separate tracks focused on adults. One in the community and educating individuals about careers in healthcare and how they can, access these careers at the 3 different hospital systems. One aimed at incumbent workforce. So that is being owned by Advocate. And there's a target of a number of different positions within each of our healthcare systems that are in demand, but also a relatively low lift in terms of additional education and certification. Also have identified career pathways associated with each role. And then a third program there focused on individuals who are interested in stepping into a first-time leadership role, so also incumbent adults. And that portion of the track is aimed at UCM. So I'll be providing a brief overview of these different pilot programs, some of the successes and challenges that we faced getting them up and running. And I do want to say we are currently in the middle of piloting all of them. So none of them at this point in time are solidified programs, but we're right in the middle of making sure that we're getting these different work streams up and running. So for the NCA Pathway Program, I'm going to skip right to the next slide. Is the slide advancing on the shared screen or no? It is, okay, perfect. So for the NCA Pathway Program, we've had a challenge with nursing support assistants at UCM. There's a really high demand across industry, and it's still increasing, and there's a stagnant or declining talent pool. So, even though different hospitals within Chicagoland are really, hiring more of these individuals, there's less for us to choose from. And so there's a really high amount of competition. At UCM, applicants are not always familiar with the position and associated requirements. So even when we do have applicants in the talent pool, they might not be, we might be hiring less than anticipated and retaining less individuals than anticipated because the job was not what they expected. And for these similar reasons, there's also, can be a drop off during our onboard process. And, sometimes a misfit in terms of, cultural fit at the organization. To address these challenges and make sure that we have an appropriate pipeline of nursing support assistants to staff the hospital, we've decided to provide access to individuals from the community to a fully funded CNA program. And to do this, we collaborate with a community hiring partner to source and support students. We employ these students in a temporary position at UCM to prepare them for their future NSA interview, establish cultural fit, and let them get to know, kind of have an observational, almost job shadowing experience, so they can really get to know their colleagues, what the work actually looks like, and have that experience before jumping in. And we also guarantee interviews for individuals who successfully complete the program. Our aim with each of the cohorts in this pilot is to have 10 folks participating in an 8-week CNA program at an educational partner, which for our first 2 cohorts has been Malcolm X Community College. We provide, again, that temporary paid position at UCM in an observational role on a clinical unit. They attend once a week for 4 hours each week for the duration of their 8-week program. They then partake in 40 unpaid clinical hours at UCM, which is required to obtain their certification. And after they get their certification, and after that, they are guaranteed an interview for an NSA position at UCM. As I mentioned, this work is done in collaboration with a number of partners. So we work with Skills for Chicagoland's Future, who has actually provided us with this model. They are responsible for participant recruitment, sourcing, and screening. They provide job readiness support and coaching to help them secure their offer. They host monthly professional development sessions around workforce and academic techniques. They provide tutoring support and also connect with students, kind of act as that intermediate between both the student and the school and student and employer. And they assist with the program and grant management for this pilot. Malcolm X has collaborated with Skills for Chicagoland's Future to make sure that our candidates are ready and prepared to actually enroll at their institution. They provide their own educational support and guidance. They keep track of attendance and grades to let Skills know about their academic process so that, if something ever occurs, Skills can intervene with their own case managers and mentors to help check in with the participants to make sure they stay on track. And they also provide support in making sure students are registered, have all the necessary supplies, and are successfully able to complete their clinical placements. And UCM is responsible for program management on the employer side, including new hire support and onboarding, working out the schedule with Skills and the education partner, checking in to make sure that Skills and UCM are on the same page in terms of participant performance, and keeping Skills up to date about any potential necessary professional development opportunities. So far we have for this pilot, we are planning for 3 cohorts. Cohort 1 has successfully completed the programming. We had 9 participants enrolled with 7 on track to complete the program. And 6 individuals are currently engaged in the interview process. So we anticipate that last individual to complete her clinicals within the next quarter and be eligible for hire at the same time as cohort 2. Cohort 2 is kicking off this week. They started first class at UCM on Monday, and we have 6 participants. They will begin their temporary position at UCM this Thursday, and their CNA program begins on August 30th. So we anticipate them to complete their program at around late October, take their exams in November, and transition them to hire in late November and early December. For cohort 3 and in the future, we're thinking about kind of the following, different topics and ways we can expand and improve that pilot. And we're interested in seeing how we can transfer this model to Ingalls Memorial Hospital, which is another hospital within the UCM system. Thinking about establishing an NSA float pool for program participants to facilitate the hiring process. Since we're currently in the middle of our first round of hiring, that's subject to change based off of our experience. But we've spoken with our recruitment team, and that might be helpful since we have such a large number of roles open, and students might not, or participants, despite having that experience on staff, might not have the best idea of what unit they might want to work on permanently. And so that's something that we have in discussion. And we also want to identify funding opportunities for program sustainability in the future after the pilot, and determine whether or not that we to continue sourcing through a community partner, or whether we want to do participant recruitment and sourcing in-house. Some of our successes and challenges, we've been very successful with the slate of candidates that we've actually received. These individuals have been really, really ambitious, really motivated to work at UCM, and have really clearly established reasons for, why they want this position, where they see themselves in the future, and again, why UCM. So we couldn't be happier kind of with the sourcing and screening that our community partner has provided. We're also really excited, just even from our first cohort, kind of that turnaround. I know in workforce development, these types of programs typically have a rate of relatively 30% success, and to see that we have 7 out of our 9 participants likely to complete the program successfully has been really excellent. One of our challenges has been partner management, and kind of making sure that all 3 different parties are on track. Malcolm X has their own, they have their own, calendar, they have their own expectations and requirements. And with Skills kind of managing that relationship, sometimes there could be a little bit of miscommunication. And so that has been a challenge, but definitely not one that has been impossible to overcome at all. We've been trying to supplement with additional communication. And I would say our, last challenge with this program has been around thinking through sustainability in the long term, and kind of that last question for those last 2 questions for cohort 3 and beyond, thinking through what does it look like if we close that communication gap and have everything in-house? What would that cost? What are the resources necessary for that? And how can we make sure that we are adequately providing retention support, both in program and post-placement for all the participants to ensure that we have such high levels of success in the future? And how would we plan on, funding this and making sure that all of the supports that is making the program successful thus far, we have access to in the future? Right now, Skills has primarily managed funding through WIOA, which has also proved to be a challenge in terms of who we're able to select as an education partner, who we're able to actually source as a potential participant in the program. And it has lengthened that process for the participants for screening and has added in a few extra steps there. So thinking through whether or not we want to continue looking at WIOA as a funding source. Would we want to go in there and apply for funding for this type of program individually, or whether we have to continue in concert? And if we do choose to go for additional grant funding or either alternative funding in some other way, what does that look like and how can we ensure that this program is sustainable in the future? With that, I'm going to kind of wrap this up just for time's sake. If you're interested in the other two programs that I mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out and I will share out this presentation. I'll make sure that April gets this so that you have my contact information for follow-up questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Yes, I will be sending out everyone's slides with the recording. So thank you for that. I'll just open the floor to questions for Ashley now. Anybody have any questions? Ashley, you spoke a little bit about your applicants not being familiar with the position and associated requirements and that being a challenge. Did you feel like there was a lack of knowledge in the recruitment process, or where did you think that was coming from? Or the same way, what do you think could have helped?
So there's definitely a portion during the screening process that we, implement to kind of help with that. Literally just asking the participants, what do you know about this role and what has motivated you to take this on? And understanding that, an NSA position sometimes has tasks that some people don't find desirable, and, including bathing patients, changing folks, that sort of thing, nail maintenance, and that might not be attractive or the best suitable job for all folks. And some people don't know that that's part of that position. And so asking individuals to actually tell us what they know with the position and what's required has been helpful. And then again, actually allowing them to communicate with not just the NSAs who are currently employed at UCM, but all the different folks on the unit to understand what the NSA role is, but also how they work in conjunction with their colleagues on the unit to make everything run smoothly. So I definitely think that has been helpful, but that lack of information, and I think just a general desire to gain employment at UCM, as a anchor institution in the neighborhood, has been a motivator, but can lead to different applicants possibly applying for a job that they don't know as much about.
I have a question in regards to what the NSA role, I guess that's equivalent to the CNA, that's just the title at
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is there any push to get these folks or participants stackable credentials, possibly to move into maybe like a PCT role or even possibly an RN?
That's definitely something to consider in the future when interviewing these participants and asking about, again, why NSA, why this program. Many of them, if not all, have described the desire to eventually move into those roles. Again, at this pilot stage, we just want to make sure that this first portion of the pipeline is functioning we worked out the kinks and it can run well on its own. But we are definitely interested in thinking about how we can, really give these participants a upward trajectory throughout the organization. And part of that right now, we do have efforts with our benefits and compensation team to revamp our education and tuition reimbursement. And so that's kind of one of the options that we are waiting on to see how that could potentially fit into this program to support folks in the future. But as I mentioned, a lot of these are projects in process.
Ashley, is it fully funded by WIOA right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to add, this is Betsy from UCM, just to add on to what Ashley was saying in thinking about the long-term career paths for these individuals, I think that is key, and that's the long-term strategy. I think our tuition reimbursement policies, as they evolve, will be able to support these NSAs moving into RN positions, and that's the long-term goal, is just to get them in the door into that healthcare career. But I think, Ashley said it perfectly. It's helping these individuals to understand what the career looks like, make sure that they're interested and it aligns, with what they're looking for. And that will, in the long term, provide a better fit and more well-informed decisions for these individuals on making, their career choices.
Thanks, Betsy.
I just have one final question. Ashley, do you know if Skills is open to partnering with more hospitals in a similar program? Or is this something that they built with you and perhaps only have the capacity to manage this one?
I'm definitely happy to connect folks with Skills who might be interested in pursuing that further. I know that the model was actually developed for Rush. And so they have been open to working with different hospitals. I also know they have gone through a little bit of a restructuring and reprioritization. They are expanding nationally. So I'm not exactly sure what their capacity is for, starting a new partnership with a new hospital system to replicate this program, but definitely happy to connect folks who are interested.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I would love to connect with them, and I can pass on that information to the whole collaborative if it's appropriate. Sure. Any final questions for Ashley before we move on? Okay, thank you so much. It's a great program. We'll move on now to Jerry Bach from Advocate Aurora. Jerry, you should have permission to share your screen as well. And as Jerry's presenting, feel free to put questions into the chat. We'll also have a few minutes at the end to ask questions.
Perfect, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Just want to double check my mic.
Yes.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jerry Bakke, Manager of Workforce Development for Advocate Aurora Health. I've probably not met most of you on the call. I report into Clayton Pryor. I oversee our system workforce development strategy and oversee the workforce development team in both Illinois and Wisconsin. Ashley invited me to present today on our registered apprenticeship strategy, something I'm really passionate about. Just as a little bit of background, I've been with the organization for 6 years now. I've been in HR for 10 years, but originally right after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do professionally yet. So I was a carpenter apprentice for 6 years. So I saw the model working in construction. So when conversations started to occur about bridging apprenticeship models to healthcare, it's something that really intrigued me. So what I'll do today is kind of give a quick overview of what we have done so far from the apprenticeship strategy perspective, and feel free to interrupt and ask questions along the way. All right, so you should be able to see my screen right now. High-level overview, if no one is familiar with apprenticeship here, it's not common to healthcare. Some organizations are starting to adapt it. It incorporates 90% on-the-job learning. So we pay individuals an hourly wage to train them a majority of the curriculum on the job. 10% of the time they are, and they as in the apprentices, are getting paid to go to school. So we partner with a community college or a technical school to be able to offer what we can't train on the job. An apprenticeship needs to be a minimum of 2,000 hours or 1 year. And then along the way, apprentices get progressive wage increases for increased skills and increased capabilities. So in order to do an apprenticeship, there are a couple of required partners. It's usually employer driven. You need a technical school or community college, depending on what state you're in. And then you need to partner with a government entity. So in Wisconsin, where I'm located, we partner with the Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards, which is through our Department of Workforce Development. In Illinois, we partner with the Department of Labor. States are split out 50-50. Some have state boards of apprenticeship. Others have divert to the Department of Labor for apprenticeship if they don't have a state apprenticeship bureau. So I'm going to kind of go over this really quick. Hopefully everybody kind of catches the gist of it. Going over it real high level, real quick, just in the interest of time. As I mentioned, Wisconsin has a state-sponsored apprenticeship bureau. Illinois has a Department of Labor bureau. What I want to mention is once you develop an apprenticeship program for your employer in a particular state, it's scalable statewide. And in the instance of if you develop a Department of Labor sponsored apprenticeship, it's scalable to any other state that has a DOL backed apprenticeship program. It's nice for employers with multiple states that have that they have operations in because it's easily scalable once you build a model. Just a high level overview of all of our strategies within our workforce development department within Advocate Aurora Health. Registered apprenticeship and co-ops are one of those 11 strategies that we oversee. So we have a couple of models that we piloted over the last couple of years. First and foremost, we have our culinary arts training program. You'll see one of our apprentices in Wisconsin on the right. And then we have a facilities maintenance technician program. Components, like I mentioned, it's an earn and learn program. The nice part about it is it's training and education. So individuals don't need to worry about going to school on their own time, and they can focus on learning the skills that they need for that job and getting paid for it. All the while they're earning industry certifications along the way. So we have our culinary arts training program. And for those of you that have internal food service operations and don't outsource, you realize that the cook position in healthcare is really hard to find. I actually came from a site HR role, and some of these positions were sitting open upwards of a year plus to find an appropriate cook with the skill set we were looking for. And it was a talent need across our system, hence why we developed this model. So we ended up landing on a 3-year program. Illinois and Wisconsin differ a little bit. It's between $6,000 and $6,200. And we launched that program in Wisconsin with 4 apprentices in January of 2021. You'll see one of our apprentices in the right here. At components, you really learn all components of what it's like to be, we can't call it a sous chef program, but really there's training to be a sous chef within our facilities. They are obtaining a ServSafe certification along the way as well. So that's one of the first classes they take with our school system, and they get ServSafe certified if they don't already come in having that certification. So they're learning everything from, garde-manger to mise en place to all the different components of all of the facets of our dining operations, including like menu planning, cost control. So really we're trying to set them up to be the future generations of leaders within our organization. I'll add with that program, before I go on to facilities, we've already identified within the 4 apprentices we have in Wisconsin, our operations team has already said 2 of those individuals have the capabilities to be leaders beyond this apprenticeship, and we're only less than a year in already, which is really great. So we also have a facilities maintenance technician in Wisconsin. It's a 2.5-year program. Those apprentices are wrapping up early next year. So we launched in November of 2019. As expected, they're running pretty much all the facilities operations within our facilities across the system. Every building's a little bit different. Some have boiler systems, other are on city steam. So they're really learning all aspects of what it's like to keep the lights of a healthcare operation on. They're learning plumbing, HVAC, electrical maintenance. And then they also get certified as boiler operators along the way, whether their facility has boiler operations or whether they have to go to a different facility to be able to learn that. They get certified as low pressure and high pressure boiler operators along the way. On the right, you'll see one of our apprentices. And I think it's important to call out, you'll see a lot of diversity within our apprentices here. The nice part about these programs is it level sets the playing field so that we can hire attitude and train skills. So it also integrates a ton of diversity into the organization as well. Not only just race and ethnicity, but we also have female apprentices coming in male-dominated fields. We have disabilities, individuals with disabilities coming in as well. And it's something we have to report out under our affirmative action guidelines as well. Future opportunities, just on our last slide before I take questions. There are some national models that have come up that we're looking at. Maybe we go through them, maybe we don't, but it's really planted the seed that we can use this in other areas within our high talent needs. Looking at a lab technologist position right now. There are some pharmacy technician models that are available to us. Also recently, biomedical engineers, so those individuals repairing equipment within our facilities are models that are being created nationally and statewide for some of these programs. So could be some of our next models that we look at in future phases of this program. So that's all I have. Just wanted to provide a 30,000 view on our apprenticeship programs to date. But happy to take any questions as well.
Hi, Jerry. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ashley. Jerry was just going to inform you that your sound is going in and out a little bit. We can still hear you, but it gets really quiet sometimes.
Okay.
But I think everyone heard most of it. But Ashley, you go ahead with the question.
I have two questions. One, is your culinary program also operating in Illinois, or is it just Wisconsin right now?
We are working on bringing that to Illinois starting in January. So we plan for 7 more apprentices within all of our facilities within Cook County. We're partnering right now with the City Colleges of Chicago and Washburn Culinary and Hospitality Institute. So pretty much, we're in our recruitment process. We are getting our model approved by the Department of Labor, and then hopefully we'll have that standing late this year, early into January when students start classes.
That's fantastic. And my second question, are any of the roles that you have apprenticeships for union positions? And if so, how do you navigate the challenges of setting that program up?
So for the most part, we don't have unions in these areas within our organization. But I know just in general, apprenticeship is often governed by union entities. It is something that we're cognizant of when we're planning this. So we're kind of looking into the future and just kind of doing our research before we launch apprenticeship programs in these areas. But for us, we don't have a lot of unions in these areas to work with.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
And Jerry, the 3 other future possibilities that you mentioned, do you know of anyone currently using those apprenticeship models in Illinois or Wisconsin, or would you be the first, or do you know?
So there is one of the other healthcare systems within our Milwaukee collaborative is using the pharmacy technician model. Other than that, the other 2 models that I discussed, they're happening in other states, just not yet in Illinois or Wisconsin.
Do you have any sense of why that is, of why Illinois has been slower to pick up these apprenticeship models?
I would say the industry, healthcare industry in general is not doing a ton of apprenticeship. So it's a newer education model for the healthcare systems. It's not something that, a lot of healthcare systems have ever had to look at. And I think once you're looking at talent shortages, it brings up a new way of thinking to be able to train on the job versus waiting for individuals to get through school and then come on the job. So I would say there's only a handful of organizations across the nation that are doing apprenticeships. And most of them are in the very early stages of doing it. So maybe, you know, the ones I know of nationwide, maybe 4 or 5 years in. So relatively new to this training aspect.
Jeremy, what is the sort of completion rates for the facilities maintenance, since that's the longest or oldest apprenticeship?
Yeah, good question. So we had 4 apprentices in. We've only lost 1 along the way. That was for more personal reasons, but other than that, we've maintained those individuals throughout the duration of the apprenticeship so far. Same thing with culinary. We started almost a year ago. We haven't lost any of those individuals so far. So relatively high retention rate throughout the duration of this apprenticeship so far.
Jerry, I know, you know, as Ashley mentioned, I know Rukia has brought this up before, that dealing with unions is one of the challenges to adopting the apprenticeship model. What other challenges do you see as hospital systems are thinking about this model?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. One of the things that we had to do as a team, we developed in order to partner and have more than 5 or more apprentices, you need to develop an affirmative action plan for your apprenticeship program. Now, that's not a full-fledged federal affirmative action plan, but you have to be able to adopt an affirmative action plan for your apprenticeship program. It requires things like making sure you track your outreach, making sure that you're asking questions in your application pre-offer and post-offer for race, ethnicity, gender, disability, and making sure you track some of those outcomes and do a year-end analysis. So I would say it's not particularly hard to set up, but it's just some of those government mandates that you need to work with in order to stand up an apprenticeship program, you know, by having an affirmative action plan in place. Some of your systems are already doing those, but for us, we weren't. So we had to adopt work with external counsel in order to get something like that developed. Other than that, it's relatively easy. It's just making sure you bring your stakeholders together, like the school systems and the either Department of Labor or State Bureau of Apprenticeships. You know, once you have a process worked out for one, it's relatively easy to scale from there once you know the process.
Jerry, I have one more question for you. How are these programs funded?
So we leverage VLO funds through the workforce boards to be able to help offset the cost of tuition, as well as like any textbooks they require. The nice part is that's covered a majority of our apprentices so far. When individuals aren't applicable for VLO funds, we do leverage our ed assistance funds that we already offer all of our team members to be able to pay for classes. So that's a majority of what the costs are required to be able to create this program, or tuition and books.
Great, thank you so much, Jerry. I know I asked Jerry to focus on apprenticeships because I have heard that many of our other employers are curious to hear more about the model and have some discussions around those challenges in setting them up. Does anyone have any final questions for Jerry before we hear from Alicia? Okay, sounds good. Thanks again, Jerry. And
Thanks for having me here.
Alicia, I believe you have permission to share your screen as well. Here's Alicia Boyd from Cook County Health.
Great. All right, so good morning again, everyone. All right, perfect. So I'm Alicia Boyd. I'm the manager of workforce development at Cook County Health. I am going to talk about Cook County's Health HIS Pathway Program. So it's in the field of IT, health IT, information systems. So just a brief overview of our career pathway and how the impetus of how it started is our career pathway it's an incumbent worker training program and is really designed to upskill CCH current HIS members who served in our computer operator role. So our role about 2 years ago as a computer operator was recently converted into a role as a service desk analyst. And it was changed due to what happens, technological advances, system changes. So that role of computer operator role really became obsolete and it required a new skill. And so this program was used to serve as that vehicle to upskill these folks and give them basically the skills and tools they needed to be successful in that role. And then also the new role as the service desk analyst require industry recognized certifications that the previous computer operator role did not. So within this incumbent worker training, there are 5 certifications that the employees get. So they get the CompTIA, it's 2 certification tests they take. So A+, it's 101 and 102. They also get ITIL, foundation certification, and then they get 2 certifications from Microsoft. So the MD 100 and a 101. So just in Cook County Health, most of our roles are set up in a level 1, 2, and 3 role. And so we have service desk analyst 1, service desk analyst 2, and 3. And so each role kind of required like stackable credentials. So as the service desk analyst 1, that required just the A+ certification. Service desk analyst 2 required the A+, and I believe it's the ITO. And then 3, that's more of the management level, requires all 3. So each level requires stackable credentials in order to qualify. And so this program has really been a great program to incorporate. When I talk about the successes and challenges, I'll talk about how this program served its purpose, but it's really benefited Cook County Health as well as the employees. So one, because that role changed and that previous role, computer operator role, became obsolete, these employees were at risk of losing their job. And so there was a great benefit to the employees because enrolling in this program, which was completely voluntary, allowed them to maintain their current employment at Cook County Health. Then on the flip side, it allowed Cook County Health to maintain their seasoned employees. It allowed Cook County to reinvest in their current talent again, maintaining seasoned talent. Because the position changed, a lot of the incumbent workers had the basis, the basis of the skills that they needed to do the role, but there was a skill gap. And then of course, they didn't have the industry recognized credentials that are required. So this program definitely tackled that. One of the things that Cook County Health is working on, we haven't got there yet, but succession planning. So as we talk to the incumbent workers, we talk about preparing for future vacancies. If I'm a service desk analyst 1, and the service desk analyst 3 become available, just by participating in this program, I now have all 3 certifications I need for that upward mobility and to fill that role. And then my most favorite of all, it reduces the barriers. So as an adult learner, as an adult in the workforce, there are 2 main barriers that we usually face when it relates to going back to school to upskill, to get certifications or a degree. And it's 1, do I have the time to attend class? And 2, do I have the money, right? What's the return on investment if I pay for this degree or this certification? And so this program really addresses both of those barriers because this program is completed during work hours. So we have, and I'll talk about how many participants we have, but all of the incumbent workers that participate in this program are getting paid. So they're doing it during work hours on the clock, and it's fully funded through CCH and their partners. So it addresses both of those barriers that really prevent adult workers and adult learners to going back to school to upskill. So the logistics of the program. So right now we currently have 14 incumbent workers that are participating in this program that was split into 2 cohorts. Each cohort is in length of 18 weeks. So that's for all 3 certifications. They're 2 days a week for 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. And again, these folks are completing this training on the clock, so they don't have to go, on a Wednesday night or a Saturday morning to complete the class. They're getting paid their regular hourly pay to complete the class. So these are who's involved in making this program possible. So of course, us, we're the ones who need our workers trained. So we provide 13. So we have the 14 computer operators that's participating. We're paying the trainers their regular hourly pay or salary to participate in the program. And then the program is done on site. We provide, of course, the space, internet access. And then in some classes, I forget which one, but they have to work on like old desktops and computers to complete the certification portion. So we provide the old desktops for the participants to work on and take apart. National Able is our training provider. And so they provide the facilitator. The facilitator comes on site. That was a big question of what we were going to do. Were we going to do it virtually? National Able has been successful with converting a lot of their classes virtually. But as we got feedback from a lot of the incumbent workers, a lot of them are, again, adult workers, older. And so that online interaction in that learning environment is something that's very new. And so a lot of people prefer to have that class in person, especially for some of the hands-on things you have to do as it relates to taking apart and putting together a desktop. Then they provide the practice exams and pre and post assessments. Westside United is a huge partner in this. They're providing the funding for laptops. Laptops is required through National Able as part of participating in the program. Then they also provide, along with their adult partnership and help planning out the logistics of it, they provide the supplemental funding of where Cook County falls short and then the WEO workforce falls short. And then of course, the Cook Workforce Partnership, they provide the training, the ITA vouchers to cover the training at National Able, and also they cover the fees for the first exam for each certification. So what's going well? Participation and engagement with the staff. So I feel like a lot of this, and then we have an 83% completion rate. People think that this should be a given because these folks are getting paid to go to school and get a training, and then plus they're going to maintain employment because of this. However, we learned very quickly that is not the case. So some folks are just really not engaged and really want to do the program, even though in most cases it means keeping their job or even being able to have upward mobility. But it was difficult for some because some of them have been there 20 plus years, have not been in school, have not interacted in that sort of teacher relationship and learning within a working environment. So having to re-engage staff and have them participate was slow at the upstart, but that has really increased. They have really enjoyed the class. 83 completion rate. As I talk about the areas of opportunity, I talk about like why that's important. Our partner engagement, one of the things, as a lot of we all with Ashley and Jerry, they talked about these programs. A lot of our programs would not be possible without the partner engagement. So like WIOA, Westside United, they play a very big role in making these programs possible. And so not only providing that logistical support and the funding, but they have been very helpful as being a thought partner because these programs are new. So I didn't mention it when we first started, but these programs, Cook County Health, first of all, workforce development to Cook County Health is a new arm, a component to HR within the past 3.5 years. But this program, this incumbent worker training program, is new to Cook County Health. So really having partners engage and talk about, best practices, what's working and what's not, has been really helpful. And then having that internal stakeholder partnership, that's been going well. Really, to make any program successful, you got to have the buy-in of the leaders and the internal staff. So the manager that's managing these 14 staff, right, it requires extra work for him because he has to let go 7 staff and make up, because our HIS department is a 24-hour operation. So really having that internal stakeholder support to make sure that the program is successful is very important and has been helpful for us. So areas of opportunity, staff scheduling. Again, our HIS department is a 24-hour operation. So figuring out how do we ensure that these participants can get these certifications while they're on a clock. And so I don't know why when we initially started this, we thought we were going to train everybody in one fell swoop, but of course we didn't think the scheduling through, like if all 14 participants are in class, who's going to service the workforce, right? And so we divided it into 2 cohorts, but that has even still been challenging with making sure that our HIS department is sufficiently staffed to help, especially now that everything is in this virtual setting and relies a lot on technology. How do we make sure we have efficient staffing to serve the health system? So that has been an area of opportunity. Credentialing, preparation, early engagement. So this was one of our biggest challenges. Each class is, the whole program in itself is 18 weeks. They do each class separately. So they start off with I believe they start off with Microsoft, then they move to ITIL, and then they do A+. And so as we did this program, as we piloted this program, what I guess was not communicated, we didn't communicate well, each partner, was we were under the impression that once the Microsoft class ended, that they were taking the certification exam. And then once the ITIL ended, they took that, and then an A+. And so as we started to track and started to do interviewing and following up with, we realized that that wasn't happening. And so now that the first cohort has ended last month, the middle of this month, our participants, the first 6 has not taken the credentialing exam. And so as we interviewed and talked to a lot of them, there was no break. Initially, we didn't have a break. So once they completed Microsoft, they went straight to ITIL the next week. Once they completed ITIL, they went straight to A+. So there was no break to give them that room to prepare and schedule that credentialing exam so they can get certified. So that was one thing we noticed. And then the other, not issue, it just was that National ABLE, in order for them to get their voucher to take their credentialing exam, they have to take these preparations, these pre-tests, which is a great way to make sure that we're not setting up the participants for failure. So they have to take 8 exams per credentialing exam. So I believe that comes up to about 40 practice exams before they actually take the test. And so a lot of participants had issues because they're working adults to fit time into taking those practice exams, because those practice exams needed to be taken outside of work hours. And so we were just trying to figure out how can we engage those practice exams throughout the class. So because of that, for our second cohort, we're going to have a pause, a week break in between each class. And then we're going to ensure that the instructor is having early engagement of those practice exams before each class ends. So it's not just, okay, this class ends, you have to take 8 practice exams or 16. They're doing that throughout the class. And then one of the things that we lacked, and we were really relying on our learning and development team in HR to support this. But of course, with the pandemic and then just some staff changes and turnover, we didn't have our full learning and development staff. but really setting up a support and coaching for the staff that are going through this to really address any concerns or issues they have early on or throughout class, instead of waiting into the class ends to say, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like, this is what I wish I would have had support before. And so that's what we're going to ensure that we incorporate. Our next cohort starts September 13th. August 13th is when the first cohort just ended. I did want to talk about, and you can let me know, April, if I have time, about 5 minutes or left. I just want to talk about like how this program got started and why we chose this particular cohort. Is that okay? Okay. So I thought it was important because Cook County Health is 98% unionized. And so when we were first brought this opportunity to have an incumbent worker pathway program, we were looking at 3 different options with the community partners in Westside United. And it was the medical assistant, this HIS pathway, and then a nursing. And so we really landed on the nursing and the HIS pathway program. We ended up dropping out of the nursing pathway because just they were working out a lot of kinks, and then just the sheer time it was going to take to complete was a little bit longer, and we just didn't really have a capacity to engage in that at that moment. And so we landed on the HIS pathway program. So initially, the approach that we were going to take with this program was we were going to have incumbent workers who maybe serve in like an entry-level role, so like a dietary aide, a transporter, or a building service worker, those very entry-level roles, who maybe wanted to upskill and have like a career transition. So if I was a dietary aide and now we have this opportunity available, I can apply and I can, get upskill and certifications, well, reskilled, not upskill, but get reskilled and get certifications so I can have a role in the IT or HIS department within Cook County Health. And so that was what we were going to focus on at first. But that came a lot of challenges because we're a heavy unionized workforce. It became challenging because one, a lot of our employees who have been in Cook County Health are seasoned workers. So they've been there 5 years plus. And so before that computer operator role switch, our building service workers, our dietary aides, our transportation aides, they're getting paid $16, $17 plus starting. And then some of them who have been there long, they're in the 20s, mid-20s, as far as their hourly pay. And so if we reskilled them, gave them certifications that they needed to do that transition into a new career into the HIS field, it really defeated the purpose, because starting off entry level in that HIS role, they would have been at the same pay, if not less. 2, it would have required them switching unions, so they lose that seniority in their current union that they're in by switching over. And so that was a challenge that a lot of the workers were seeing, like, okay, if I switch, I no longer have my seniority. And then 2, it's a possibility I can be taking a pay decrease because I'm already making $25 an hour as a dietary aide. So those were some of the challenges, but this became a perfect opportunity when that role switched to a service desk analyst from a computer operator. And so as we're starting our second cohort in this HIS career pathway, what we're doing as a health system in HR is just really looking at, because we see the value in this incumbent worker career pathway, especially as we're talking about succession planning and try to prepare our workforce. We're trying to see how we can best use this and what areas can we use this incumbent worker pathway programming.
Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have questions for Alicia?
It's not so much a question, I guess it's more of a discussion point. The incumbent worker, I think trying to hone in on like who's the right target sort of candidate for that is really important, because at Rush, we also ended up with challenges where, like with the medical assistant pathway, where not enough people, they did the training, but then didn't switch over, because it would represent either they be getting the paid the same or paid less. And so it didn't even make sense for them. Like, it just wasn't something that they could feasibly, like, it would make sense for them to do. And so I think kind of honing in and really figuring out which candidate makes sense and sort of the years of service will be important moving forward. And that's really great that y'all, sort of looked at the evaluation of pathways, but I feel like that's some guidance that we probably all should kind of take forward. It seems like for the incumbent worker pathways, somebody with probably less than 3 years experience in certain roles is probably a better bet for looking at some of this upskilling and switching over and such, and maybe having to think about other ways to supplement, if we can, like, make up the difference in what they would have been getting. I don't know, to have people move over, but this has just cropped up time and time again. It seems like just over the past couple of years that I've seen these pathway programs go into effect. So yeah.
It made sense as we looked at it for the career trajectory of the long term for that employee doing a career transition. Yeah, short term, it doesn't make sense, but long term, but how do you convince somebody that, right? Like, it makes sense for you to switch over once you get experience in this role. Yes, you're starting out at $20, $25 an hour, but that career trajectory, you can move up and you have these options. Whereas as a building service worker, it's very limited. You can either be a supervisor, a manager, and that's okay if that's, what your career pathway is, but it's very difficult. And then two, that means a lot to people with saying, if I'm an AFSCME and I have to switch over to SEIU and I've been here 6 years, that means a lot to me, because that means what days I can take off, holiday, so yeah. How do you try to convince that workforce? So that has been a challenge. And so yeah, and we're trying to look at that. The pathway that made sense with the most immediate highest return was the nursing program, with having somebody start at that entry level role. But that pathway, and I'm sure you're in those discussions, but that pathway just was too long and track. So it didn't really have that immediate return on investment that some of the health systems was looking for. But I think that that's what most people, we haven't surveyed, but most of the workforce would have been interested in.
I'm wondering if equity, like, I don't know if that's a opportunity for some form of I'm calling it equity-based support, because a lot of times some of the decisions, notwithstanding the, vacation certain seniority in the union, but it is more of the immediate need with I'm making this money now, my bill, like, I'm paying bills based on this, getting this amount of money each week or each month, and doing something different, even for, a year seems like, like that's just not possible. And so that has definitely been a wondering for us, like, yeah, how do you make up that difference sometimes to make it worthwhile for people to make that switch? Because it is a better option usually on the long term, but short term, it's a difficult choice for people.
Alicia, in retrospect, I mean, this change came about because these incumbent workers were essentially about to lose their jobs. Their jobs have been cycled out. And in retrospect, have you been able to initiate any conversations with the unions about being able to put in place a more proactive kind of approach to continued employee development that would prepare employees for this kind of a transition without, the looming loss of employment to be a driver there? Have you been able to have any conversations with the union about that?
Absolutely. So I myself has not had conversations with the union, but my conversations with our CIO, when we initially brought this on, he was newer in that role about 3 years ago when we first started this conversation. And that has been one of his big pushes. He he values education and getting certifications. The thing is, and the reason why that's been such a big conversation, again, I haven't been in those rooms, but just on a conversation with him and I, the thing is we get a stagnant workforce because it's unionized. If I keep my head down and do the bare minimum, I'm going to get those pay step increases regardless of which. And so where's the incentive for me to where's the incentive for me to get, as a computer operator, like I said, some of them have been in that role for 20 years, right? If I started out at $15 an hour and I'm now making, $30 an hour, and I only have a high school diploma because that's all it required at that time, where's the incentive for me to be able to go to school and get these industry recognized certifications, right? If I can maintain employment, I'm gonna have pension when I retire, right? And so that's the challenges that we're facing. So I know our CIO has been making a heavy push on making sure that we have professional development opportunities for our staff to make sure that we're giving them the tools and the skills, whether it's industry recognized certifications, whether it's updated training on a certain system to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this discussion. I've been taking some notes, and I think I'll just share my screen now. I've got some of our challenges that we've talked about today listed here, about applicants not being familiar with the position and requirements, and they might not be a good fit. About it being challenging to coordinate with partner organizations, WIOA funding challenges. I know participants may have been out of school for a long time, so that's sometimes a difficult hurdle to get over. We heard about the challenges setting up apprenticeships, especially with unions, and also the affirmative action plan and the lack of model programs in healthcare. Scheduling can be difficult. And then this problem we've been talking about recently, where it can be difficult to figure out which candidates are best for incumbent worker pathways, especially with unionized workers, when they might be looking at an immediate wage decrease and don't see that long-term incentive. I'd like to move us on to talking about ideas, but does anyone want to add some more challenges that you see over and over again as you're trying to set up these adult or incumbent worker pathway programs?
This is Susan from North Shore. I would add on here, I'm looking to see if it's on there. For incumbent workers, I think if this goes with the people that have been out of school for quite a while, is preparing them to successfully complete their coursework. So it's, I think, harder for somebody who's midlife wanting to go back to school than someone who's been out of school for 3 years. So how do we create that support structure to get them the skills they need to then be successful in the program that they're entering?
Yeah, absolutely. I know we saw that with the MAP program, with folks having to start by doing Malcolm X's level up before being able to start the actual coursework. So we talked about a lot of challenges. We've heard about a lot of different programs that are aimed at different types of positions. I wonder if anyone has thought of any ideas about how we can collaborate to address some of these challenges. What can we do together as CHWC, as 12 hospital systems at the same table with our strategic partners? Any thoughts?
This is one of the things, one of the initiatives that we're working on is like a community pipeline programming. And so it's similar to what University of Chicago is doing with the NSA program, but we're really looking at allied health careers, are hard to fill roles, high turnover roles, and trying to see if we can create a community pipeline program with getting some of the community members upskilled. And so one of the challenges that we've been facing is if we create this pipeline, we don't have the volume of hiring these folks, right? So if we, let's say, enroll 20 participants and we get 20 participants certified, let's say if it's medical assistant, right? They go through a medical assistant program, they get the employability skill training, right? They go through that whole workforce development program, and we only have, let's say, 5 roles. So how do we ensure that those other 15 participants secure employment? So I think, I don't know, but maybe sharing some type of shared employment opportunity, employment effort, or community pipeline program effort. I think if we have shared troubles with recruiting or turnover in a certain role, and if we go in together, I mean, this is just the idea, a community pipeline program, and we are training. And so now, out of the 12 hospital systems, they had 20 participants go through this program. At the end, now, these 12 hospital systems have 12 participants they can choose from. I don't know how that would work, the logistics of it, but that is just a thought.
Would add, this is Clayton. We've been doing some work related to community pipelining for a while with Advocate Aurora. We created the Advocate Workforce Initiative, and we're also working collaboratively with the University of Chicago and Sinai on a grant that has a community-facing arm. So I think that this is something we could explore that has some level of funding, but to your point, there's the Healthcare Sector Center that, the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership has, but I think we could do a better job of creating the synergies around the roles that as we are upskilling individuals, that we have kind of all the players at the table where they can go, as we know, like turnover has a lot to do with location and proximity and different things like that. So just kind of having that lift, because I think, staffing these positions is only going to become more challenging given the workforce shortage as a part of, COVID-19 fallout. So I think that that's a great idea. One thing that I did like that you were doing was focusing on displaced workers. And this may be more of a futuristic project, but thinking about roles that may be changing or that may be phased out. How do we support healthcare workers? Whether it's like the job is, becoming automated or, increasing technology that, people may not have the skill set to do. How do we create training and or opportunity for them to transition into other roles or to upskill so that they can maintain their current roles? I think that that's a great opportunity for all of us if there is synergy across like roles. The other thing I'd add is medical assistance, right? That continues to be a challenge for all of us. There are some other kind of hard to fill roles, but if we could crack that, I think all of us would be very, very happy.
How would you do that, Clayton?
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Early on, and I know, Betsy, you were involved, and that's when I had just joined CHWC, but I know we had got shared data from each health system, and it was really focused on like some of those hard to fill roles, high turnover roles, and we had kind of identified as a collaborative like what those roles were, and I think it was like medical assistant or OR tech. And I think that's the way, like, just, I know some organizations are a little bit shaky about sharing data or even just getting data out, but just seeing if there's, like you said, Clayton, some synergy around what those roles are. Because typically in some cases, like when I looked at our hard to fill report, if some of these roles I haven't even heard of, and I'm like, that's why it's hard to fill, right? So if we can't create a program or create a recruitment effort around a position we only got 2 open roles for, that is really either because it's never, it doesn't vacate that much, so employees usually stay in that role longer, or if it's just not a huge role in the healthcare system, but it's very important. And so just saying if hospitals across the health, across this collaborative have those same issues, and then, building those programs around that.
Hi, this is Zafar here. I just, after looking, like hearing all the challenges and the ideas, I was thinking about one thing, which is like we discussed about several programs and then the apprenticeship and then so on. My thought was like, okay, so we're looking at all these programs and roles which are kind of an entry level or say 2 to 3 years of experience and so on, or technical skills. So as a group, is there a way that okay we can work on getting a grant or something and start a program which should be more of a professional program around bachelor's or master's? Okay, that would help maybe not all, but some of them to actually get into proper professional jobs, okay, and help grow in the healthcare careers.
Hi, this is Mary Schmidt with Midwestern Career College, and I just want to tag on to what Alicia was saying. I think that as a college that largely educates in the area of allied health, we do know that that lack of awareness of the roles is a barrier, for us when it comes to enrollment. And there are some tremendous opportunities within that band of allied health, but you don't know what you don't know. So people, would not seek out maybe a surgical technology program if they've never heard of that role. So increased awareness, I think, is very key. The other thing that I hear and kind of resonates with me is I'm a benefit of tuition reimbursement programs and funded my my bachelor's degree that way when years ago. However, many people are not in a position to come up with the initial funds to enroll in a program. And when we talk about tuition reimbursement, it might work really well for certain individuals who are at a certain earning level. But if you're not there, if you're literally living paycheck to paycheck, let's take the medical assistant role, for example. It's a great entry level role. And oftentimes we talk about how that individual can transition and continue on their education and move into nursing or some other role. But it's very heavy lifting for that individual to come up with the funding in order to do so. So I think my suggestion and challenge to the team here would be to look at, are there ways that you can look at tuition rather than reimbursement, but more of a direct billing? Because that initial funding that individual needs to come up with to return to school may not be feasible. And if we remove that particular barrier of entry, perhaps we'd have greater enrollment in some of these roles that need to be filled.
And I think that okay, I agree with you, because if you just do a retrospective check and then think about like okay your interview sessions and think about when you ask question to the people like okay how many of them have kind of completed the bachelor's or master's, have dropped out because of financial concerns, you would think that okay, there is a lot of people who struggle with that initial funds and also the support. So is there a way that okay you can, whether it is based on certain criteria that people should qualify or whatever, like if there is a way that okay we can support them to get those initial funds and enroll into professional programs that would really help them?
I agree with that. And what I would suggest, a way to do that rather than reinvent your entire tuition reimbursement program, is to come up with some internal scholarship program. One of the things that we love about scholarships at the college is that you can determine what the parameters of those scholarships are. So if you developed a return to school scholarship, for example, you can determine who's going to qualify for that, what roles are covered, what positions they would, move into, and give them that upfront money. So then the tuition reimbursement can help them once they get that initial investment.
Another area that you may want to look at is not just tuition reimbursement or even tuition support, but many students, the tuition they may be able to pay for, or that's paid for them, but the books, the daycare, all of that is not paid for. So I know like programs like we have at KISH for our students their daycare is paid for. It's free for them. Their textbooks are free to them. So that helps reduce those costs, because the tuition may be free, but the textbooks are very expensive. The equipment is very expensive. So I think that's another barrier that we really need to think about. How do we support those students so they have are able to be able to pay for the things that we don't think about other than tuition.
This is a great conversation. I want to follow up with one question in regards to Alicia's suggestion that the CHWC employer partners share in our recruitment and placement efforts a little bit more, and mentioned that perhaps you would run a program where you have 15 people, but you only have spots for 5. How would you ensure that those other 10 are placed? Is that something that's happening with other programs? Because my assumption was that these pathway programs that you're creating, you have enough demand for them internally within your systems to place all of those people internally, but perhaps I'm wrong. Are there programs where you're struggling to figure out where someone is placed? And would some reciprocity among CHWC hospitals help with that?
So this is Clayton. Thinking about our advocate workforce initiative, I think it really depends on the geography of where the talent was coming from. So if you think about where our acute care facilities are placed, Trinity's on the southeast side, Christ is in Oak Lawn, South Suburban is in Hazel Crest. So when we have someone who's, maybe on the west side, we really didn't have a lot of acute care facilities within kind of the medical district or that area. They'd have to go further north to Masonic. So sometimes it was the preference of the trainee specifically looking for something that may be a little bit closer to home, that wouldn't require them to take a couple of buses and a train to work, etc. So it was helpful to have other options for them specifically, given that was a grant initiative. I think it's something to consider, just as far as, thinking about how we can draw people as a collective versus maybe as an individual system. So, thinking about doing, even if it's not a pathway training program, but like a collective hiring event or something that's focused on healthcare careers that really lifts the sector or the industry and not individual systems. But then obviously we're a benefactor of that. So if people are interested in healthcare, we can kind of talk about specific locations and roles, etc. Again, some of the learning and work that we're trying to do right now with a few systems that I mentioned, I think some of that can lift and play to the larger collaborative, but maybe there is an opportunity for us to pull some others in, or even just kind of think outside of that, how we can collaborate.
Thanks, Clayton. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We only have a couple of minutes left, so does anyone have any final thoughts, final ideas on what CHWC can do? Even if it's also just another conversation that you think we should have. Something you think we should look at from other parts of the nation, perhaps. Okay.
I mean, it sounds like, though, to close out, it would be worth it to look at some of those other healthcare systems that have the farm tech and the lab tech apprenticeships already sort of mapped out, just to at least see what, obviously you don't exactly replicate, but just to see, what that is done or how that's looked across the country would be helpful.
Great. Thank you, Rukia. On that note, we will wrap up for today. I'm going to share this recording as well as the slides from today. As I mentioned, we'll be presenting some of the learnings at our September quarterly meeting and deciding on programming moving forward. I think after this discussion, we have a lot of interesting ideas or questions to consider. I may bring these to our steering committee to refine a little bit more, or perhaps invite some of you to have a follow-up conversation. So thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Hope to see you.
Thanks.
And
Take care.
Thursday's
Thank you,
talent
everyone.
acquisition. Tell your colleagues. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.